one thing your sibling did that you will never forgive them for? My sister married my first love, and the worst part isn't that she did it. The worst part is how she did it. I dated a guy named Joel for 4 years. We started going out junior year of high school, and stayed together all the way through college. Same college, different majors. He studied accounting, I studied education. We made it work the way young couples do, eating cheap dinners together, studying at the same library table, driving home for holidays in the same car. Joel was the first guy I ever said I love you to, and meant it. We talked about getting married after graduation, not in some dreamy, vague way. We actually talked about it. He told me he wanted to save up for a ring. I told him I didn't care about the ring, I just wanted him. He said, I know, but I want to do it right. That was Joel. He always wanted to do things right. My sister Lenore is 2 years younger than me. Growing up, we were close in the way sisters are when they share a room and don't have a choice. She borrowed my clothes without asking. I covered for her when she snuck out. Normal sister stuff. She was always the louder one, the funnier one, the one who walked into a room and people noticed. I was the quieter one who kept things steady. When I brought Joel home for the first time, Lenore was 17. She was polite to him, said he was cute after he left. I didn't think anything of it. Over the next 4 years, Joel became part of the family. He came to every holiday, every birthday, every barbecue. My parents loved him. My dad Roman called him son. My mom Jaslyn saved him a plate even when he said he wasn't coming. And Lenore was always around, always joking with him, always sitting next to him at the table, always finding reasons to text him about things she said she couldn't ask me about. I noticed, but I told myself it was just Lenore being Lenore. She was friendly with everyone. That was her personality. Then senior year of college, Joel got quiet. Not mean, just distant. He stopped talking about the future, stopped mentioning the ring. When I asked him what was wrong, he said he was stressed about finding a job after graduation. I believed him because I had no reason not to. We graduated in May. By July, he told me he needed space. He said he loved me, but he wasn't sure he was ready for the next step. I was crushed, but I told him I understood. I gave him his space. I didn't beg. I didn't chase him. I respected what he asked for because that's what you do when you love someone. 3 weeks later, Lenore told me she had something to tell me. She sat me down at the dining table and said she and Joel had been talking. I said talking about what? She said talking. And then she said she thought she had feelings for him. She said it started a few months ago and she tried to fight it, but she couldn't help how she felt. She said she was telling me because she respected me and didn't want to go behind my back. I sat there and all I could think was a few months ago was when Joel started getting distant. A few months ago was when he stopped talking about the ring. A few months ago was when my 4-year relationship started dying, and I didn't know why. I asked her if anything had happened between them. She said they kissed once, just once, and she felt terrible about it. I asked her when. She said April. 2 months before Joel asked me for space. 2 months before he said he wasn't ready. He wasn't unsure about the next step. He was already taking the next step with someone else, with my sister. I told Lenore I needed time to think. She hugged me. She actually hugged me, like she was comforting me over something she caused. I didn't talk to Lenore for 2 weeks. She texted me every day saying she was sorry, and she never meant for it to happen. She said the heart wants what it wants. She actually said that, like she was quoting a greeting card to justify what she did. After about a month, my parents got involved. Roman sat me down and said he knew it was hard, but Lenore was still my sister and I needed to be the bigger person. Jaslyn said these things happen, and that Joel and I were probably going to break up anyway because we were so young. So now my relationship of 4 years was something that was probably going to end anyway. Like it was nothing. Like it didn't count because we were young. Lenore and Joel started dating openly that September. She brought him to Thanksgiving. He sat at the same table, in the same chair, across from me, eating off the same plates Jaslyn used to save for him when he was mine. Nobody said a word about how strange it was. My parents acted like this was just the natural order of things. Lenore held his hand on top of the table. Joel didn't look at me once during the entire meal. Not once. They got engaged 14 months later. Lenore called me to tell me. She said she really wanted me to be happy for her. She said it would mean the world if I could be her maid of honor. I said yes, but with one condition. I wanted to write my own maid of honor speech. No input from her. No previewing it. No edits. She laughed nervously and said of course. She had no idea what she just agreed to. I spent the next several months being the perfect maid of honor while building something Lenore would never see coming. I went dress shopping with her at a fancy bridal boutique where they bring you champagne and everyone sits on a white couch and claps when the bride walks out. Lenore wanted me to try on bridesmaid dresses at the same time she tried on wedding gowns, side by side in the same mirrors. So I stood there in a sage green strapless dress she picked out while she walked out in a floor-length white gown with lace sleeves, and the whole room was looking at her like she was something out of a movie. She spun in front of the mirror and then turned to the woman helping us and said, "Doesn't she look amazing? Joel is going to lose his mind." Joel, the guy who used to tell me I looked pretty when I wore his hoodie and no makeup. The guy who was mine for 4 years. And now I'm standing in a dress my sister picked, smiling while she talks about how my ex-boyfriend is going to react when he sees her walk down the aisle. I smiled. I said she looked beautiful. I meant none of it. I planned her bridal shower at our parents' house. Spent 2 days decorating the living room with white and gold balloons and little picture frames with photos of her and Joel. I set up a game station and a dessert table. And during the shower, someone asked how she and Joel got together, and Lenore launched into this version of events I barely recognized. She said Joel and I had naturally grown apart after college. She said she and Joel became friends during that time, and one thing just led to another. No mention of the kiss in April. No mention of the months of secret texting. No mention of the fact that Joel asked me for space because he was already falling for someone else. She rewrote the whole thing right there in my parents' living room, and Jaslyn was sitting in the corner the whole time holding a glass of lemonade, nodding along like every word was true, nodding like she hadn't told me that Joel and I were probably going to break up anyway, nodding like she hadn't watched me sit at that Thanksgiving table with tears behind my eyes while Lenore held Joel's hand. Then one of Lenore's friends, someone I'd never met before, walked up to me while I was refilling the chip bowl. She looked at me with this curious little smile and said, "Were you okay with it when they first got together?" I looked at her. I looked across the room at Lenore laughing. I looked at Jaslyn still nodding in the corner, and I said, "I'm here, aren't I?" And I smiled. The girl smiled back like that answered her question. It did, just not the way she thought. After the shower, once the guests had cleared out and I was picking up paper plates and crumpled napkins napkins. Skip showed up to help me carry stuff to my car. He'd been at the shower because I'd asked him to come for moral support, and he'd sat in the back the whole time not saying much. But standing in the driveway with a trash bag in his hand, he looked at me and said, "I saw your face in there. What are you actually planning?" I stopped what I was doing. I looked at him for a long moment, and then I told him. I told him about the speech. I told him that when I stood up at that wedding as the maid of honor, I wasn't going to give some sweet toast about love and destiny. I was going to tell the truth, the real story, the whole thing. Skip put the trash bag down. He was quiet for a second. Then he said, "Are you sure? Because once you do that, there's no taking it back." I said she took something from me and made everyone pretend it was nothing. I just want to say what actually happened. One time, out loud, in front of everyone who pretended it didn't. Skip looked at me for a long time. Then he nodded. He didn't try to talk me out of it. Every time Lenore told the pretty version of the story, I wrote down the details in a locked note on my phone. Every date she mentioned, every milestone that overlapped with my relationship with Joel. She thought I was being a good maid of honor. I was building a timeline. My friend Skip was the only person who knew what I was planning. He never pushed me. He never told me I was being crazy or bitter. He just showed up and let me make my own decisions. Every night I'd open that locked note and work on the speech. No insults, no name calling, no screaming, just the truth, in order, with dates. I wanted it to be clean. I wanted it to be simple. I wanted every person sitting in that reception hall to hear the words and not be able to look away. Not because I was yelling, not because I was making a scene, but because the truth, when you just say it plain and out loud, is the hardest thing in the world to argue with. That's what made it different from Lenore's version. Her version was a love story. Mine was a timeline. And timelines don't lie. A week before the wedding, Roman called me and said he was proud of me for stepping up for my sister. He said, "This is what family does. We show up for each other no matter what." In all the months since everything happened, through all the conversations and the holidays and the dress shopping and the bridal shower, my father had never once said he was sorry for what happened to me. Not once. He told me to get over it. He told me to show up. He told me to be the bigger person. But he never once looked at me and said, "I'm sorry you're hurting." At the rehearsal dinner, I was straightening a vase of flowers near the back of the room when Lenore pulled me gently down a hallway. When she turned to face me, her eyes were red. She grabbed both of my hands and her fingers were shaking. She said, "I need to tell you something. I know what I did to you was wrong. I've always known. I just couldn't admit it because then it would mean my whole relationship started on something ugly. Please don't say anything tomorrow. Please. I'm begging you." For just a second, I didn't see the woman who stole my boyfriend and rewrote the story. I saw my little sister. The one who used to crawl into my bed during thunderstorms. The one who borrowed my favorite jacket so many times it started smelling like her perfume. Something inside me cracked, and for one moment I almost let it all go. Then Lenore wiped her eyes, smoothed her dress, walked back into the rehearsal dinner, and 5 minutes later she was standing in the middle of the room with a glass of wine in her hand, telling Joel's relatives the pretty version of the story, smiling that big Lenore smile, everyone around her eating it up. 5 minutes ago she was holding my hands in a hallway with tears in her eyes begging me not to tell the truth, and now she was back out selling the lie like the hallway never happened, like she hadn't just looked me in the face and admitted she knew what she did was wrong. That's when the last piece of something inside me went quiet, not angry, not sad, just done, because Lenore wasn't asking for my forgiveness. She wasn't trying to make things right between us. She was trying to keep me quiet. She wanted to say just enough to make me feel guilty about the speech without ever having to face what she did in front of anyone else. She wanted my silence gift wrapped in a hug. I watched her from across the room laughing and glowing and telling her story, and I made my peace with what was coming tomorrow. Lenore didn't want the truth. She wanted comfort, and I had been giving her that for over a year, but she gave me a microphone. She gave me a stage, and she told me I could say whatever I wanted. She had no idea what she agreed to. The morning of the wedding, I woke up before my alarm. I lay in bed for about 10 minutes staring at the ceiling, and the only thing I felt was still. Not nervous, not scared, not even angry, just still like the surface of water right before a stone hits it. I got dressed, grabbed my garment bag with the bridesmaid dress inside, and drove to the venue. In the bridal suite, Lenore spotted me the second I walked through the door. She jumped out of her chair and hugged me so tight I could smell her perfume and hairspray all at once. She pulled back and held my shoulders and said, "I'm so glad you're here. I couldn't do this without my sister." Her eyes were bright and clear, no trace of the red shaking girl from the hallway the night before. She looked like a bride. She looked like none of it ever happened. I smiled and said I wouldn't miss it. An hour before the ceremony, I stepped into the hallway for air, and Jaslyn found me. She was wearing a soft blue dress with pearl earrings, and she looked beautiful. She said, "I know this hasn't been easy for you, but today is about Lenore and Joel. Whatever you're feeling, just keep it together for one day. Can you do that for me?" I looked at her and said, "I've been keeping it together for over a year, Mom. One more day won't kill me." She smiled and patted my cheek the way she used to when I was little. Then she walked away. She didn't hear what I actually said. She heard what she wanted to hear. She heard cooperation. She heard silence. That's all she ever heard from me. The ceremony was outdoors in a garden with white chairs and an arch covered in flowers. I stood where I was supposed to stand holding Lenore's bouquet. Joel said his vows, and then he said it. He said, "You're the one I was always supposed to be with. Always supposed to be with." Like everything before Lenore was just time he was killing. Like our 4 years together were a waiting room. Like I was a placeholder, a rough draft, something to practice on until Lenore was old enough to take my place. I gripped the bouquet tighter and stared straight ahead at a point above the guests' heads where the trees met the sky. At the reception, the best man gave a safe, generic toast, and everyone clapped. Then the DJ leaned into the microphone and said, "And now the maid of honor." Lenore turned to me with that big, glowing smile and squeezed my arm like she was so excited to hear what I was going to say. I stood up. I walked to the microphone. The room got quiet. I could see Roman with his arm on the back of Jaslyn's chair, Lenore beaming from the head table, Joel staring at the table. Same as Thanksgiving. Same as always. I adjusted the microphone. I didn't need my index cards. I had the whole thing memorized. I started soft. I kept my voice low and steady the way you talk when you're not trying to convince anyone of anything, when you're just saying what's true. I said most of you know me as Lenore's older sister. What most of you probably don't know is that Joel and I dated for 4 years before he and Lenore got together. The room went still. A few people glanced at each each other. Lenore's smile faltered at the corners, but she held it. Joel's head came up from the table. For the first time in over a year, he was looking at me. Not past me. At me. I kept going. I said Joel and I started dating junior year of high school. We went to the same college. We talked about getting married. He told me he wanted to save up for a ring. And then in April of our senior year, something changed. He got distant. He stopped talking about the future. I thought it was stress, but that wasn't it. I paused. Lenore's smile was gone. Her face was flat and pale, and her hands were in her lap. Jaslyn's hand moved to Roman's arm and gripped it. I said in April my sister kissed my boyfriend. She told me about it in July after Joel had already asked me for space. She said she tried to fight her feelings but couldn't. She said the heart wants what it wants. I let that phrase sit in the air. A few gasps came from different tables. One of Lenore's friends put her hand over her mouth. Another woman set her fork down like she'd lost her appetite. Then Lenore stood up. Her chair scraped against the floor and her voice was tight and shaking when she said, "Stop. You promised you wouldn't do this." I looked at her in her white dress with her perfect hair and her perfect makeup and her perfect wedding that was built on top of my broken heart. And I said, "I never promised you anything, Lenore. You never asked. You just assumed I'd stay quiet like I always do." Lenore's face crumbled. She turned to Joel and grabbed his arm and said, "Say something." Joel didn't move. He didn't open his mouth. He didn't stand up. He didn't defend her. He didn't defend himself. He just sat there frozen, staring at the table like if he looked down long enough the floor might open up and swallow him. Same Joel. Same guy who asked me for space instead of telling me the truth. Same guy who let other people do the hard part for him. I kept going. I said, "I'm not up here to ruin anyone's day. I'm up here because for over a year, everyone in this room has been told a version of this story that skips the part where I existed. Lenore tells people they became friends after Joel and I grew apart. That's not what happened. We didn't grow apart. He was pulled away. And when I found out my own parents told me to be the bigger person, my mom said we were probably going to break up anyway because we were young." I looked at Jaslyn. She was sitting in her soft blue dress with her pearl earrings, and tears were running down both cheeks, and she wasn't wiping them away. She wasn't moving at all. She was just sitting there staring at me with this look I had never seen on her face before. It wasn't anger. It wasn't shame exactly. It was the look of someone hearing something they already knew but had never had to hear out loud in a room full of people. Roman was staring at his plate. His jaw was tight and his shoulders were stiff and he didn't look up. He couldn't. I said I was the bigger person for over a year. I came to Thanksgiving. I planned the bridal shower. I stood up here today in the dress she picked for me. I was the bigger person every single day, and the only thing it got me was erased. The room was so quiet I could hear ice settling in someone's water glass. Lenore was really crying. Her shoulders were shaking and her mascara was running and she had one hand pressed against her mouth. Joel's hands were flat on the table and his eyes were fixed on some spot between his plate and his water glass, like a man who had just realized the thing he'd been running from had finally caught up to him in a room with no exits. I said, "I love my sister. I do. And I hope this marriage is everything she wants it to be. But I'm done pretending that the way it started didn't break something in me. I'm done pretending that nobody did anything wrong, and I'm done being the bigger person." I set the microphone down on the stand. I didn't drop it. I didn't slam it. I just placed it back gently the way you put something down when you're finished with it for good. I picked up my clutch from my chair and walked toward the exit. The room was silent. I could feel every single pair of eyes on me as I walked between the tables. I kept my head up. I kept my steps even. I didn't rush. I didn't slow down. I just walked like a person who had finally said what she needed to say and didn't owe anyone in that room another second of performance. When I got to the back doors, Skip was standing just to the side of the doorway with his hands at his sides. He didn't say anything. He didn't nod. He didn't give me a thumbs up or a sad look or any of that. He just reached over and held the door open. That was it. That was enough. I walked through the door and behind me I heard Lenore sobbing. Not the quiet kind anymore. The real kind. The kind that fills a room. And then I heard Roman's voice tight and low but loud enough to carry. He said somebody go talk to her. He meant me. He was telling someone to come after me. To bring me back. To fix it. To smooth it over the way he always wanted everything smoothed over. But nobody followed me out. I walked down that hallway and through the lobby and out the front doors of the venue into the warm evening air and nobody came after me. No footsteps behind me. No voice calling my name. No hand on my shoulder. Just me and the sound of my heels on the pavement and the sky turning pink and orange above the parking lot. For over a year the thing I was most afraid of was being alone with the truth. I spent all that time smiling and showing up and being the bigger person because I thought that if I stopped everyone would leave. And now they didn't follow me out. And it was okay because I finally said what was true. I didn't need Lenore to apologize. I didn't need Joel to explain. I didn't need my parents to admit they were wrong. I just needed to hear myself say it. And I did.